Hello, welcome to a supplemental video of techniques making different types of forms in Rhino. So this video is a supplement to our in-class demos, and it's just going to contain a few techniques that I thought would be potentially useful. The material from this video is not going to be included on the final exam because this is a supplemental video. So let's see what we can do here. So we have our lamp sort of that we made in class on sort of the first day working with NURBS form creation in Rhino. And first of all, it does look like our lamp is a little bit, we built it sideways. That's pretty common because sometimes I like to just put the form in where it'll make most sense while I'm building it. But we do need to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm going to make the center of the rotation somewhere in here. It's not really vital. And then I usually will just hit shift to put this in ortho and then flip it up 90 degrees. And that's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Now, before I move on to making other lamps, I do think I'm going to go ahead and turn this lamp off. I have it in some different layers here, and typically what I do with the light object is I'll make a separate layer for the light object, and typically I kind of make a standalone layer for the lights, and that's so in a scene so that I can change all of the lights on or off at one time. So when we get more sort of light objects in here, we'll go ahead and do that. So right now I'm just going to control click or right click and give it a change object layer. And so now it should be resting on that light layer where I can get rid of it. And let's see, you might notice I just made a tiny little mistake there that I also put the curve on the light layer. And I think it would probably be nice to go ahead and ungroup these objects. Looks like they're grouped right now. And then move the curve onto the curve layer. Just so everything's kind of set up correctly as we're going along here. So turn the light off too. And so from here, I can sort of have a blank canvas and I can go ahead and draw one or more lamps. And so I thought a fun type of lamp would be the kind of lamp where it has like multiple arms. So I'm going to go ahead and make a small cylinder for the base. So not a box. I'll make a cylinder here. And I'm sort of just drawing it without any real exact sort of notions of where it should go. I did notice that when I created it, I didn't create the kind of origin or the center of this to be kind of right on the 0, origin. That might be kind of useful for later, so I'm just going to go ahead and move it into place. So I'm going to move it from the center down to this 0, point. And that'll make it a little bit easier to glom together with all the other stuff that I'm going to add in. So let's go ahead and make an arm. And I think we can make that arm using a control point curve. So I'm just going to start at the center here. And oh, I didn't quite grab it quite right. So I can either try again or I can just kind of, there we go. Or I certainly could just move it into place. So I think I'm going to have this go here and maybe this go here. And then maybe one more to kind of give it this like lampshade. So the lampshade can kind of hang off of it. And so from here I can, you know, I have a curve. There's a bunch of stuff that we've done with curves up to this point. But probably a good strategy for this type of a form would be something like a pipe. And a pipe is just a really easy way in Rhino to create some thickness around a single curve. So it's under the box menu, and you've got a couple of options here for pipes. You've got a pipe with flat caps and a pipe with rounded caps. For this, because we're going to be attaching other stuff to the pipe, I think probably flat caps is the best option. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Now you can use a different radius for the start and for the end, but in this case I think we actually want a uniform thickness for the pipe. So I'm just going to take a look at my grid here, and it's asking for a start radius. I don't know, like one point seems actually quite thick, because that would be 2 points in diameter. So let's go ahead and maybe try to make this something a little bit smaller, like 0.25, and then we'll hit enter. Now that will apply to the sort of first radius, and then it asks for an end radius, which we want that to be the same because we want this to be uniform. Because we're making a uniform pipe, we actually don't need the point for the next radius. We can just hit enter. And so now we've got this like nicely kind of drawn pipe. And so basically what I'm going to do with this object is I'm going to go ahead and put a lamp with a lamp shade on this. But then after that, I'm going to take the pipe and the lamp object and multiply it by a couple of different instances. And in doing that, we'll have a lamp that has maybe like 3 or 4 arms coming off of it. So let me go ahead and go over here to the front view, and you can see we've got kind of like a point where this kind of comes off. I think from here we could probably go ahead and make a lampshade. Whether we need to sort of like resolve this into a light bulb is, I think, probably beyond the scope of what we're doing in this class. But definitely the point light would wind up somewhere around here, I think. So this seems like a fine point to sort of like make a lampshade. And I think we can make that lampshade so many different ways to do it. Probably by making, I think I do want it to be a circular lampshade. So if we could just go to the sort of simple circle here, and I'm actually going to start the circle like up here, because I think that that would be the place where I would actually want it to probably intersect. So I'm just going to open it up to some sort of scale here, and I might move it down just a couple of notches, like maybe right there, so it's a little more centered on the tip here. And then from there, I can certainly bump it up a couple of points. I'm going to hit the shift key so that it stays uniform. And this seems like a pretty good place to start. So there's our lampshade kind of placed. And now at this point, I think it would be a good idea to make a bottom sort of rail for the lampshade. And we're going to use a slightly different approach. So instead of making the lampshade completely sort of cylindrical, I think it would be super fun to take the star function, and the star does indeed actually like make, you know, stars or polygons, but in order to kind of like get this a little bit nicer, we can sort of make, let's see, a center. I'm just going to go ahead and make it here. So right now it's set to number of sides as 6. I'm actually going to change that to 30, which is quite a few. And then, pardon me, I'm actually going to do this kind of out in space so I don't get stuck up here. And so I'm just going to make this 30. And let's see, so there is my corner. That's approximately the size that I want it. And then it asks for a second radius. And so for the second radius, we're just going to come in, and we want it to be sort of like fluted, like a lampshade would be, like a pleated lampshade. And so this is probably going to be a better sort of starting point for the lampshade than where we're at here, although we can certainly still use this for reference. And so I'm just going to move it into place. I'm going to hit there we go, ortho to kind of make it a little bit more uniform. And so we could certainly use this as like the starting point for our lampshade. Probably what would be a good idea, actually, let me show you what we're going to do. And then I think it might actually be a good idea for us to move this down and create the lampshade as if it's pointing upward. So let me show you what I mean by that. Well, we're going to go ahead and come in here, and we can certainly go to the solid menu and try a couple of these extrusion methods, like, for example, straight. And that will definitely get us somewhere, but it's maybe not completely where we want this lampshade to be, because what I would like is for the lampshade to be a little bit larger on the bottom in the XY dimension rather than moving it sort of straight up and down. So I think probably what would be helpful here is to actually take the rail for the lampshade, move it downward. I'm going to hit ortho so it just moves uniformly. And then actually extrude the lampshade up into the sort of so we're going to go for solid, extrude planar curve, tapered. And so then we can pop it back up to this, and the draft angle is basically what sets the amount of the taper. And it just so happens that the draft angle is set up exactly the way we would like it at this point. So that's kind of convenient. We could certainly just, I'll show you what it happens if you change it to like something like 10. Then it's going to be a much more kind of pointy, taper. So I'm going for something a little bit on the natural side, and that is basically what I'm looking for. Now, we have this kind of issue that we've had with, it's not really an issue, it's just a characteristic of what happens when you make forms in this way. We do have this sort of, let me go into shaded view so you can see it really well. Okay, so we do have this sort of top and bottom that is closed right now and has a surface on it. So I do think it would be a good idea to go ahead and hollow this out using the shell command. And we're going to select this face, and then we're going to go upside down and select this face. And probably the thickness right now is set at 3. I think we set it that way for the boat. So I would actually offer that maybe something like 0.25 or 0.5 would be a better thickness for this. And then we can certainly just hit enter, and there's our shell. And so this is, maybe it could be a little bit thinner. We probably could have gone with 1/8, but I mean, I think this is fine. When we make our rendering settings, we're going to make this object translucent, so the light will sort of fall through it. And so right now it looks like, okay, we've got some basic stuff here that we can work with. So I'm going to go ahead and take this object and migrate it to the curves layer. And then from here, we can certainly take this object and copy it in a couple of different ways. So one way to copy it is by using the copy function. So before I go ahead and copy it, I think I will group it. So there's the group function. And the copy function is actually kind of awesome. So the copy function, it might not be the greatest thing for this particular object, but I do want to show you how it works. So if you grab something with the copy object, you can click on the copy object, select an origin point, and then you can literally copy it all over the sort of drawing space. So if you're looking to make like a lot of repetitions that are done with a sort of interactive level of control, in other words, you're kind of picking the point where they go, the copy function is great for that specific thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and just enter and undo this because that's not exactly what we want here. We actually want all of the lamp objects to sort of emerge from this single point. So I think what would be helpful here is actually a rotation. So we can certainly do rotate and copy at the same time. So in order to rotate and copy at the same time, you just click this copy box. And then when you go to rotate your object, I'm just going to put it in ortho for a quick second there. Then you can rotate this object and you can make repetitions, as many copies as you like. So this is already starting to look a little bit excessive. I was kind of hoping to have maybe just 2 or 3 of these. So I think probably one thing that I'm going to do is get rid of a few of these. And now we've got this sort of wacky lamp looking thing. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what if I want this like curved object to actually look different from the other one, but maybe I want the lampshade to be the same? And I would say, okay, well, probably I would go ahead and place the objects by copying them. And then I would ungroup this. Excuse me, clicked the wrong thing there. So I would ungroup it, and this object, we could certainly, do some changes to the surface if we wanted to, but it's really not necessary. All we really need to do is to scale this object. Well, I can kind of hear what you're saying. You're like, no, I don't want it bigger. I just want it different, maybe. And so I will say yes. So one way that you can scale things is with the scale 2D, 3D. And that will give you a uniform scale. In other words, it'll be the same in each axis. If you want to sort of stretch the object, you can go over here to the scale 1D. And that is going to offer you the opportunity to sort of scale the entire object. And we just need a reference point here. It doesn't have to be special. But you can basically kind of warp it up. And then we can still take our sort of lampshade object here and just get it into place. And so that is a little bit different than sort of making them all sort of the same. Now, I do think that I'm not crazy about these 2 repetitions. I do think I want one more iteration of this object, and maybe it would be like over here, and it would be like somewhere in between these 2. So I can certainly take this group and once again just rotate it. And probably having it go like right in between would be helpful. And then from here, I can take this object, also ungroup it, and do that one-dimensional scale on just the just on this part, this polysurface. So that would be something like one-dimensional scale, just grabbing this point at the bottom, and probably best to do that in this view. That seems good. And then from there, I can certainly bump up my object into the right spot. Now, it does look like these objects could actually use a little space in between them. They're a little tight. And so I think, yeah, to that end, you can just make a group of these. So I'm going to use my keyboard to group these real quickly. And then lastly, this form on the bottom, group in that. So now that these are grouped again, I could pretty easily just rotate them a little bit further away from each other. So working from this center point, just give it a little bit more space. And right now I have copy enabled, so I'm actually gonna escape out of that and undo that copy, and then come in here and turn copy off. Because in this case, I just want to take the actual objects and rotate them a bit. And then lastly here, I'm just going to grab this one and rotate it so it has a little bit more space inside. Now you can see really quickly, I want to show you one more thing, that this object has sort of shed a few curves as we were moving it around. So we could certainly select all of these curves, and that would be, you know, something to kind of think about. I'm going to ungroup everything real quickly, just to kind of make it so that we can select these curves independently. And I want to show you a function that Rhino is able to do, and that is in the Edit menu, you can actually select objects by category in Rhino. So for example, if you have a lot of curves in your object, you can go over to Edit, Select Objects, and then Curves, and it will select all of the curves in the scene. And so that's kind of a game changer for when you want to take the curves, let's say, and put them on their own layer. So that if we wanted to, we could go back and get to them, but they're not sort of like bothering us right now. So yeah, this is definitely like a pretty solid way to kind of make form, is just by using the copy function appropriately. Now, let's say, hypothetically, that you want to take these lampshade objects and move them into a situation where maybe there are like 50 of them or more. So let me just grab one of these light objects, and I'm just going to move it, copy and paste it, and move it over to a different section of the window. And let's get that done here. It's kind of in the middle of space right now. Let me just ground it a little bit more. And so, okay, so this is looking interesting. So right now we have this singular object. I think just for purposes of the demonstration, I'm going to move this lamp onto its own layer. Mostly, again, so that we can kind of just get rid of it and kind of draw around it. So I'm going to, Control click and change object layer. And then lastly, I actually want to stay selected on the default layer. That's actually the layer that we're working on right now. That's why it has the check. So now I've got this object kind of isolated and I can kind of work with it. And this is a big, powerful sort of technique that I wanted to show you in this video. So with this object, you can do what's called an array. And you can make an array in various different ways. There are, no pun intended, an array of options. Yeah, definitely one of the kind of like most obvious ways is to use the rectangular array. And so the rectangular array, it asks you to define a number in X direction, maybe let's say 5, and then a number in Y direction, let's say 9, and then a number in Z direction, let's just say, for sake of argument, 2. Although 1 is, you know, just flat. It would only have one object. And so then it asks you for a unit or cell spacing. I usually set that automatically. So in other words, I just click the object. Hang on just one second. So I click the object and then I go basically like that to sort of set the spacing. You can certainly do this numerically if you like. Hang on just one second. I'm going to... Hi, I'm back. So yeah, you can set the spacing, thusly and create your little army of lampshades. And certainly like all of these things, can be numerically input if you're more in that sort of persuasion. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, so this is what a rectangular array would look like, theoretically. I'm going to go back a couple steps, and we'll try a couple of other array methods. So another array method is to come into this is a method that I happen to use quite a bit, the polar array. And the polar array is going to just sort of spin things around an axis. And so for this assignment, I think it would be, or for this particular form, I think it would be useful to maybe have this be the center. And then you set the number of items. So you can set the number of items quite high if you like, something like 20 maybe. And then you can basically set a kind of angle to fill in. And in this case, we want this to go sort of fully around. So I went for the 360. Now, that's another sort of way to get a lot of things done very, very quickly in Rhino. And then there's one more array method that I wanted to show you, and that is called the array on curve. And the array on curve can be pretty cool. So basically what I would do is draw a curve that is really close to the point that you want the array object to sort of touch. And just go ahead and draw yourself like a curve. It doesn't have to be huge. But now that you have that curve, and you do, in general, you want the curve to be perpendicular to the object that you're going to work off of. Although, I mean, there are definitely reasons why you might not want it that way, but generally speaking, this is what people are going for. So now I'm going to go into the array along curve. And so the path curve is what we're looking for. And the path curve, it's a good idea when you select the path curve that you select it close to the actual object. And then here you want to go ahead and set up the number of items. Now you can also set this according to distance, but typically, I don't know, just the way I think about stuff, typically for me the number of items works a little bit better. So I'm just going to go for 20 items. And then you can see that it has indeed like kind of copied the object around that curve. Now there is one setting here that you can kind of influence things with, the freeform versus road-like. And the road-like is just going to, if your form is a little bit wackier than what we have, the road-like is just going to make it a little bit more uniform in terms of how it replicates itself along the curve. So in this case, it doesn't seem to matter that much, but if you have kind of a wackier form object, this setting can be pretty impactful. And then of course you can have it just not rotate at all and be a sort of like, straight sort of replication. So it really just depends on what you're looking for kind of out of the object. And in any case, I'm going to go ahead and put it in freeform, and we can just click done right now. So yeah, I hope that you can definitely see that these array functions are really powerful, particularly even if you're dealing with like basic geometry. So for example, you could iterate a curve and then draw like an end curve. on the edge like this, and then you could have yourself like a really nice, really interesting surface. But the function is also really good for just creating sort of generic form and forms that are already built up, sort of creating repetition there. So the next thing that I wanted to show you is, let me go back a couple of steps and get our lamp back. So one thing that I wanted to show you is the idea of a Boolean. And so we do have an object that's going to be pretty kosher, I think, to Boolean, and that is this sort of cylinder at the bottom here. Let me just pan my object up a little bit. And okay, so this object right here, the Boolean, could potentially do something really practical for us right now, and that is that if we look at this object in the ghosted view, hang on, I just have to move something real quickly. So if we look at this in the ghosted view, it does look like it's resolved pretty well to the bottom, so this might not be the best case there. But let's say, hypothetically, that we want to put some sort of cutting object on this cylinder to make it a different shape, okay? Now, of course, you could argue, well, if you want to make it a different shape, why don't you just make it a different shape and then get rid of the cylinder? And I would say, well, okay, yeah, sure. You could certainly do that, but then you would not be demonstrating a Boolean. So I think probably a good way to sort of think about the Boolean is to just draw a random shape. And I'm just drawing like a sort of hexagon. And I actually do want a hexagon here, so let me set that up. And now I'm going to take this hexagon and I'm going to just extrude it a little bit. And so basically what I've done is I've made this object that is larger than the object that we're going to cut into. And so basically what's going to happen is we would like to use this object, this hexagon object, to subtract from this cylindrical object. So this is like a classic sort of case of maybe I want my cylinder to look like it has, cuts in it or whatever, and these are some sort of just like ways to accomplish that. So that looks just fine to me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab both of these objects and I will go over to the solid menu and Boolean to objects. Now, this whole section of the menu is Boolean stuff, and you could certainly, use any of these Boolean methods. The Boolean to objects is like a super function, so it actually contains all of these other functions in itself. So what it asks you to do once you've selected your two objects is to click through to iterate Boolean results. Probably the best way to see this is going to be the perspective view. And I'm just going to click through. Okay, that's maybe not what I was thinking about, but could be potentially useful. That actually is what I'm thinking about. And that also maybe could be potentially useful, but not exactly what I was thinking about. And this would be called a union. And if we just go through again, this is actually the result that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of accept this result by hitting enter. Now, this Boolean object is a completely legitimate polysurface. However, there are a couple of cautions to sort of the Boolean process. First of all, if you haven't heard me sort of talking about having solid objects or objects that are kind of fitting together as solids. If your object is not a solid, it is not able to be Booleaned. The Boolean functions will not work at all. So for example, if I take just the same object and extrude the curve to a surface where it's not, it's basically not a Boolean object, or it's not an object that is able to be Booleaned. So let's test that theory. And I kind of have moved it into place, and maybe I even want to move it just a touch like this way. And so now I want to go back to that Boolean two objects thing, select these two objects, and okay, it looks like it does work. Oh, that's nice. Typically, this might not work as well as it's working right now. I think we got lucky, basically. But in general, and I think the reason that we got lucky is because the object is actually our cutting object. But we are not so able to sort of like do that with the other sort of side of the object. So in general, if you want to Boolean two objects and one is not watertight, you will have issues, particularly if the object that you're trying to sort of cut into is not a solid. Having the cutting object be a surface or a curve can actually work sometimes, but I can't say that I would recommend it. So in any case, we can kind of make this a funky cut object. I'm going to go into that one more time and go ahead and just get that sort of funky object going on there. And so now this object is, again, totally legit, totally fine. So we could probably, at this point, I would like to add some light objects into these sort of lampshades before we sort of move back into our class content, which is going ahead and making some things for this scene. So let's go ahead real quickly and pop some light objects in there. So here is the spotlight. That's not what we want. We actually want a point light. And let's see. So I would probably put the point light maybe at the end of this sort of object. And then we'll just do it one more time. And once more. And now that I have all three of the point lights in there, I'm actually going to grab them and I'm just going to drag them down like a couple of points because right now I think they're a little high. So I'm just going to nudge them down like a tiny bit. So right now it's not doing maybe the greatest job of nudging, and that's because I have my snaps on. So if I just temporarily disable my snaps, I should have a much better time kind of nudging them around. And I don't know, I'm being kind of picky right now, so I think I'm going to actually nudge them back up a little bit. Also, I have the grid snap on, so it's kind of like affecting, you know, that. There we go. That's the kind of smooth motion I was looking for. And so at this point, this object should be ready to just get plopped into our scene. And certainly the sort of point lights and the Boolean functions and also the copying kind of in place are really sort of powerful techniques that I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to show you. So have a wonderful day, and I will post this video as soon as I am able. Thanks. Bye.